Right, so I've actually been sitting and thinking kind of all day, just because I've been doing a lot of Doom Array stuff, on methods to control the different channels and create kind of like dynamic song sections and really cool sound design bits. Um, I think some of the underrated genius of Mick Gordon is his actual ability to dynamically control these individual song bits through kind of automation, but not automation that's tricky. It's like doing certain automation curves, for instance. So if I was to just draw this little thing here, remove that and just make it a curve like that, we notice that that is essentially what we call an envelope, obviously. And what that's going to do is it's going to be a exponentially decreasing sound. And if you were, for instance, drawing in a load of volume envelopes like this with automation, you would essentially have to draw that for every single time it occurs. So you could just copy and paste that a bunch of times, and then maybe there's a section over here, and you're just like, oh yeah, that needs it as well. That section's the exact same. But then once you get to a point where, let's say, the rhythm's a bit more complicated, you kind of think like, okay, now I need to put one there and then one there and then I don't know, like one here and then I don't know. Oh, there's like two really close bits here, and oh no, there's actually three, or something like that. And then it gets a lot more fiddly. It's not very time efficient. And what you can do with that depends. You know, that's a good way of doing it. But what you can do to mitigate that, you know, copy and pasting constantly, is set up a automatic system to do it for you. Now, there's two ways to do this, and one of them is signal sidechain. So this is basically, real-time kind of sidechain. Like there's a volume curve, you feed something in. So if we just listen to this as a kind of prelude, we see that that little gain reduction bar. Let's look at that again. That little yellow bit is the gain reduction. So we think about the gain reduction being occurred here, and that kind of ringing sound you hear in the background. And again, this is another prelude to what I'm going to say later. That ringing sound you hear in the background is actually being ducked, kind of like dynamically with the other bits which I'm running. So that'd be the other channels which I got running there. That's being dynamically ducked, and essentially that forms a very similar sound when that sound ends. So that's not like a kick, that's not a transient sound, that's not like a transient response. It's not a very quick step or a very quick impulse. It's it'd be something more akin to a bit of attack, and then it'd be a kind of constant. I guess you could maybe model the actual kind of effect of the slide chain with like a very small sine like there. So that's the variance in the actual note coming in. And then what you'd see after that note plays is a little tail as the sound ends. So that's basically the release of the note. And then you'd see your exponential drop off here. So this is how we can model doing automatic sidechain for an instrument part. Say you've got a lot of competing things in the mix, or a lot of like competing elements, and there's parts which have a kind of on and off transient element, so they're kind of like they're either playing or they're not playing, and then when they stop playing they have like a drop off. That's how we can model that, so that's really cool to use with signal sidechain. But the other thing you can do to control to essentially control this is a MIDI sidechain. And what's this used for? So firstly, I'm going to show you how to set it up. What we need is we need an instrument track, actually, a source of MIDI. And we need to just drop it down here, set the output channel to what we're about to put here. So what we're about to put here, new update, is a MIDI trigger, and that will go onto one shot MIDI trigger. And what we can do is we can either do a MIDI trigger which ducks, which looks like this is a ducking sidechain, or we can do one which gates. So it's either going to duck or it's going to gate. This is being very weird. It's either going to duck or it's going to gate, essentially. And I imagine what we'd want here is to turn the smoothing off. And essentially what that's going to do is when we trigger that via the MIDI, so via the one-shot MIDI, so I'll bring this up so we can see it. Just need to create a track. You'll notice that output Shaperbox 2, it one-shots that gate, so it's not going to repeat. You can set it to repeat if you set it on and off, or maybe toggle, or maybe not toggle. It should, yeah. You know what I mean. You can play around with the MIDI to see what it does. But as we can see from where it's following this envelope, you click like that, and it will trace it down like that. It will trace it down like this. Play it again, traces it. You see the white line. It comes to the end. So why is that also useful? Well, I'm not going to have an actual demonstration of this, but let's say you're creating a song part and you've got your doom array, for instance, and let's say that this distortion section, for instance, is being rammed full of gain, so it's really fuzzy. You don't really want that to play the entire time. The echo channel normally sounds a bit like more like a bass kind of note because it's just a sine wave. It sounds kind of cool. Just for comparison, I'll show you what I mean. So if we listen to this, you can hear the majority of that sound's coming from the echo channel. And then if we mute off the other ones and just listen to the distortion channel, that's not even playing. Wait 1 second. Let's listen to the phaser channel instead. So that might not actually be something you want to occur at all times in the rhythm. But what you could actually in theory do is, you know, instead of drawing this automation curve, you could in theory just trigger it like this. You know, you could say, I want that to ungate on the first beat and the third beat, or something like that. And then you'd have like a ba, ba, and then it'd be like you'd only hear it on those accents, if that makes any sense. I wish I had a demo to show you guys. I will do it in a song and I will break that down. But if you know what I mean, that's another way you can control the sidechain. And this can either be put at the end, like as a kind of more mix effect, you know, to control the mix. That's how most sidechains use, is just to control the mix. Or you could use it as kind of like a sequencer, a sequenced effect that goes with the rhythm to actually kind of control it, kind of like percussion. And I think that concept is very, very interesting. So one really good example of sidechaining within the Doom array, and hence why I'm going to bring this diagram back, is he said that he would use a control signal and a compressor, a compressor, to then basically control the other elements in the mix. Now, by the looks of this, he seems to be not putting a compressor on the distortion channel. Maybe he preferred the distortion channel or something when he made the array. And then these other ones are controlled by a signal. And I was saying to people previously, like, that signal can be whatever you want it to be. That can just be automation. That can be like, oh, I'm going to drag the slider around. Because, you know, if you send a signal to a sidechain that's a hardware compressor, it will just duck the volume. Plain and simple. You could literally just have noise on that channel. You could go on to, you know, a tone generator, for instance, and just have a channel with, you know, if I turn it on, this is going to be horrible sounding, by the way. I'll turn the level down. You could just do that, and then it would be very annoying, but it would control the sidechain signal. And then what you'd have to do is basically make sure that output is then, for instance, only going to, which channel do I have that on? That's really annoying. So, for instance, let's say that's going to out 1. I mean, we're still going to hear it, but if I turn off those sends, that's then going to my hardware output. Hopefully that's not doing anything weird to my hardware. But, you know, we wouldn't have to hear it, but it would still in theory be sending a signal onto a channel which could then be used to control the volume via the sidechain on that compressor because the thing's being constantly slammed. But I didn't think of that to its fullest nature. That's what I assumed it would be, because that's just the exact same as controlling the volume on these channels, and you could just like automate it. So let's say we wanted it to be really punchy, so we just go like and just like slam it back up, and that'd be a cool sound effect. But what I didn't think about is the level to which you can induce a MIDI kind of control system or a signal-based control system where you could essentially then duck or ungate something rhythmically in the Doom array to then produce a more interesting song part. So this is like the ultimate level of control which you can get. And let me just get rid of this tone. And we can actually listen to an example of that, which is very subtle, but I think is very, very interesting. So I'm going to just remove all those little demo things I put on. I'm going to remove shave the box. I'm going to remove this little MIDI signal. And we can have a look at what this compressor is doing to our feedback signal, which was generated via this microphone and then with a real guitar amp. Let me grab it. That was generated as real feedback using the same amplifier which Mick Gordon used. So the reason why I bought this, again, it's a bit of a tangent, but the reason why I bought this is so I could verify that it is the exact same hardware, and this is how it should sound. Plus, this thing is quite cheap, so just get one. It's a Fender Tone Master or something. Just get one if you want to, or just use a different guitar amplifier. So it's mainly for like the kind of same dynamic, kind of like dynamic response that I'm after to get that same sound to emulate it, so I can like verify it. But what we're doing is when our distortion, echo, and phaser channel, so that equates to channel 1, 2, and 3 on here, when those are playing and when they are played as a whole, hence why I tick all 3 channels, we are going to actually duck out the feedback, because the feedback is quite unpleasant and it's atonal in comparison to the rest of the stuff. We're going to duck out the feedback in relation to the other elements going into the bus, the main bus, and that is going to alter not the mix of the song, but the mix of the array. Okay, that's not going to alter the mix of the song. That's going to alter the mix of what's going into the end point of the Doom array. And what that essentially does is it creates a really cool kind of modulation. If you were to compare it to like a different type of synth, it's like it's changing the mix of the different channels in order to then resum it and change the overall sound quite drastically. Because you could, in theory, absolutely pin this thing with that feedback sound if you wanted to, and that would produce a certain kind of sound, but generally speaking, that sound isn't very good. So what we can do is we can choose which sound we want for that section because it sounds good, and then we can essentially use MIDI control or signal control to then, make that part better and produce the more appropriate thing for the right song section, or even if you want to break it down even further, the appropriate thing for the right accent on the right beat. So that level of control is really, really cool. That actually produces, you could do whatever you like with that. You could literally have one channel just like, especially the distortion channel, just pinging a bunch of different ring modulators everywhere, so it's completely atonal, but it produces a really cool transient, and then you could just keep ungating it if you want to at a specific part, and that would create a kind of beep sound at certain points on your Doom array rhythm. Now, I've had this thought, and this is more of the reason to go and watch my own video on how to create the Doom array, but the other thing is, basically, you want to create your own array, so then you can make the dynamic song parts, because there will be people who can give you like individual one-shot sounds and stuff like that to try and like remedy the fact that building the array is a collection of plugins and you have to tamper around with it, and if you kind of deviate from the plugins which I kind of like laid out, which are the kind of closest emulations to the Doom array, which you can do virtually. And let's say you don't really know how to do as much of those MIDI tricks or things like that. If your level of control over the Doom array isn't as confident as you want it to be, then someone making some sound design for you or some bass notes for you or some some reference material is more attractive, or using a sample pack or something like that is more attractive. But if you want to emulate the sound, not just like touch on it and reference it and be concerned with results, as I always say, like results, not the process, is that concern. Take the shorthand option, but the longhand option is to build the array yourself, and further into that, building the array yourself is the level to which you are able to use it, because it is kind of like an instrument. Think of it like a sound designer's instrument for their song part or whichever bit of sound design they're doing. That's what it's like. That's what building an array is like, and that's what building these workflows and building these systems is like. You are essentially orchestrating your own instrument, and at the very end of it, the very long-term end of it would be to then create individual bits of software and individual something like reactor modules, individual presets, individual FX chains which you can do to alter, and post-processing which work. Setting all that up is the ultimate kind of mastery of it, obviously. But this is now a new level of control which I've kind of gotten to, and I'm going to produce some demos with it. I just think that this should immediately go on the channel, because I know that a lot of people are subscribed here for the Doom Array content, and this kind of like decoding of certain soundtracks and methods. So again, to recap, we can now control it better, and we can control the mix better using these compressors here. Because not only can we control just linear volume by sending the equivalent of a signal out, which is equivalent to changing the volume on a mix knob, because that's basically what it's doing electronically. Not only can we do that, but now we can also do that in relation to a timed response, if that makes any sense. And if you know anything about dynamics, you'll know why I keep referencing like step responses, time responses, impulse responses, stuff like that. But now, not only can we do it in relation to linear gain, which is basically just moving the slider around and then automating that, we can now create time responses and step responses and whatever we want to make to actually use this thing better. So yeah, that's why I'm so hyped about this. If you're able to understand what I'm saying, then please leave me a comment and kind of say which bit you preferred about the explanation. But like, comment, and subscribe for more. This is a big step I think I've made in regards to this, so I'm just going to put it straight up on the YouTube without any editing. Thank you very much.